Hello and welcome to Sound Waves, the podcast of the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust. Here we will be sharing stories, going behind the scenes, and staying in touch with everyone who has a relationship with the Trust. You know, the Trust family has grown and grown for almost 20 years now, so there are plenty of stories to be told, there are memories to be shared, and there are many bright futures ahead too. In the virtual Zoom room with us today are Dan, who sailed with the Trust as a young person and is now part of its youth board. We have Wen, who also sailed as a young person and is one of our most well-known and beloved volunteers. And we also have Trust CEO Frank Fletcher with us too. And my name is Scott. I'm part of the Trust's communications crew. Everyone say hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, how are you all doing?
Doing very well, Frank. You doing okay?
Yeah, all good. Lovely sunny day.
Something we would really like to do with Sound Waves is let young people who have sailed with the Trust tell their own stories too. So each episode we will have some words from a young person who has sailed with us, talking about their experience with recovery or on a trip or fundraising, anything really that gives a picture of how the Trust isn't just a 4-day sailing trip, but is really a large and ongoing community. Look out for that around the middle of each episode. So for this first installment, we'll be talking about the elephant in the room, isolation. So just a quick question to the Zoom room. We're in week 5 or 6 of lockdown. How have you taken to the change?
I think I've discovered what Zoom fatigue is. I had, in the last 24 hours for work, I've had 20 Zoom calls. And by the end of yesterday, I was like, I just don't want to look at a screen anymore. But I think at the same time, we're really lucky to have the technology to keep in touch with people. And you just sort of learn to make fun in new ways, don't you? And I've never played board games over lunch with people via like Skype in a different part of the country before. That's quite good fun. Just a bit different.
I think for me, I'm in full lockdown, and so it's looked a little bit crazier for me in the fact that I'm not even allowed to go out for walks, and so I am pretty much confined to my flat. But I've experienced isolation before because I had a transplant, and being able to see the big differences in doing isolation now versus isolation then has been like really great. And technology has come a long way since I was last in isolation, and so now I get to see that and keep in contact with all my friends, family across the world, to be able to talk to them through the internet. It's been great.
So I'm feeling pretty lucky, Scott. And listening to Wen there, I'm able to go out for a walk, and I'm isolating with my wife and my kids, which is great. But I think actually it does in a very, very small way, because I can't actually imagine what Wen's going through, and other young people who have sailed or will sail with the Trust who are in that complete social isolation, feeling like that actually, my mum's on her own in her flat, and my mother-in-law's on her own, and actually I think it's given me a tiny taste of what it must be like, and actually why the Trust is so important. And I had a huge sense of relief. So I'm quite asthmatic, and I was literally one dose of a drug that I take every day for my asthma, from being where Wen is, and obviously I'm incredibly lucky that I'm not. But the fear that I had of that gives me a real understanding of actually what people are going through, and I think we're all now understanding what it's like for young people who do well. We're getting a tiny taste of what it's like for young people who are going through isolation. So it is lovely to see you, Wen. It's lovely to give you a big virtual wave over this Zoom. And it'll be great to see you back with the Trust when this is all over. I look forward to that very, very much.
When you quite quickly turned to social media to share your experience with this lockdown, you upload videos and you're very candid about how it all makes you feel. Are you finding technology is comforting, and is staying in touch that way? Is that helping the whole experience?
So I first jumped on onto making a video when I was really questioned by a family friend about why I was still going about normal just before lockdown. And for me personally, I'm at risk of getting chickenpox and that killing me because of the complications from that. And so at the time, just before we went into lockdown, for me, the risk of coronavirus versus the risk of chickenpox and the risk of everything else at that point, bearing in mind where I live, there was one known case. And so I was very much like, my risk is so small, I'm going to keep on going until I'm told I'm not allowed to keep on going, knowing full well that I would fall into the highest risk category. And so I did that video, and then I had such incredible feedback from my friends and family, especially those friends that didn't know me when I was sick 10 years ago, just being like really encouraging. And then I'd had loads of texts and calls asking me how I was dealing with isolation, and I just felt like putting it out on social media was a much quicker and easier way to kind of calm the storm, because everyone was in panic mode of, oh my goodness, so and so is not going to be okay, and so is not going to be okay. And so I just wanted to give that little bit of hope, but also the reality of what I was facing. And so that did look like doing really happy and inspiring videos, but also doing the, actually, I'm not having a good moment right now, this is my reality, as well. And I think that doing a mix of everything has been really good, because it's shown my friends, family, and extended people that I'm connected with just how I'm dealing with it and how I'm going through it. And I think it set me up to deal with it really well as well, because it was kind of a way of me processing the whole concept of going back into isolation again, which was something that I initially found very challenging because of being in isolation before and being in isolation now, and I didn't want it to be the same as what it was then. And so I kind of came into it with a different approach of, I'm not going to shut myself away, I'm not going to hide where I'm at, I'm actually going to share that, because I felt like that's what I needed to do, especially when I live on my own, just so that people know that I'm okay or I'm not okay at any one given time.
And did you find that by putting that out there, you're saying, you know, people are sort of reaching out to you and checking in with you, people who didn't know you last time you were going through your own lockdown, are you on social media helping people talk to each other more frequently or reaching out to you? Because it can be hard when you're under lockdown to keep those conversations up. It can be hard to keep feeling like you must check in with people all the time. But if you're putting that out there, does it help people ease into that habit of just checking in and being like, are you okay? How are you feeling today?
Yeah, so one of the posts I did was about, you know, the effect that happens, you know, a couple of weeks down the line, once the initial, oh my goodness, we're in crisis mode kind of pans back out and settles. I was encouraging people to set reminders on their phone to check in with the vulnerable, to check in with those people that they might not have thought about or might have forgotten about, and to not just for it to be a please check in with me, but no, you don't all have to check in with me. I have my people checking in with me, and that's great, but make sure you're checking in with those that are, you know, not going to be shouting out for help and not going to be as visually isolated as I am out on social media. And I've found that that's really helped, and I've had a couple of friends message me thanking me for doing that, because they've still had those people contacting them even like 5-6 weeks down the line. They're still being approached and asked how they're doing, which they didn't think that they would have been if it hadn't have been for my messaging.
Frank, so we obviously work together. We have meetings, and I've seen that you've set yourself up at the kitchen table. Has it been tough switching off from work? How are you managing with that?
So there's four of us working in the house. So my son is hopefully doing some work towards his A-levels. My daughter is hopefully doing some work towards her GCSEs, and my wife works full time as well. So so Justin and I have taken over the kitchen table. I think most people who know me well know that sometimes I let work dominate my life a little bit. So actually, we introduced a rule which is really great. Actually, so we've taken over the kitchen table. Me and my wife, we're showing after 20 years of marriage that we can still share a small table all day while having 15 Zoom calls and not drive each other mad. But actually, on a Friday night, we pack it all away. So we've made this absolute rule that we've got some big plastic boxes that we brought everything home in. And on a Friday night, we take all of the work stuff, we put it in these plastic boxes, and we put it we put it away, and then we don't bring it back out till Monday morning. And that's that. And it's just too easy. It's been quite a busy week this week, as you know, Scott, and it's been a little bit too easy for it just to creep into quite late in the evening. So I think at least having that cut off of Friday night, Monday morning has been really important.
Have the Fletchers developed any sort of Friday night routines?
Yes, they involve maybe opening a bottle of something and sitting down and finally relaxing at the end of the week. Not that I'd want to encourage that, but yeah, no, we've it's actually been quite nice having family time, and again, coming back to although I got a small glimpse, I'm still actually with my family, and that makes a big difference. And I do think that this has been really hard for a lot of young people who the trust works with, and that's why it's so important that we're here in 2021, and it's so important that we come through this, and we're here next year, and we're here when we can reopen our doors. We need to be here in the best possible state, so that we're here for young people who've been through what Wen has just so, as always, eloquently described.
Dan, you got married at the start of lockdown. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like being newly married and having to stay indoors? Is there any sort of sharing of kitchen tables and Zoom meetings happening there?
Yeah, so I was due to get married on the 17th of April, and the first thing that we knew was going wrong is that we were due to go on honeymoon to Venice. So ages ago, when all this started, which probably isn't that long ago, but it seems like years ago, we were sort of watching the news going, oh, apparently there's like 3 places in the world where you're not allowed to go, and one of them's Venice. Oh, well, don't worry, we'll get married and we'll go to Venice another time, that'll be fine. And then the nearer it got, we thought, oh, actually, this is looking more unlikely by the day. Now, I should add at this point that my now wife and I both work for the church that we got married in. So we had some easy methods of entry, and basically the days went past, and the caterer rang us up and said, like, are you getting married or not? Because I can't get any of the food, but I reckon I can get it if I go shopping every day between now and your wedding, but I need to start doing that. And we were like, what do we do? So it got to the 3 days before we eventually got married, and we were like, we just need to do it this Saturday. So we rang up the vicar and then both our parents, and just said, right, Saturday midday, can you make it? Great. So we had a really small wedding, which was really lovely, and then of course we couldn't go for a meal or anything afterwards. So we went for a picnic, and like 3 hours later, everyone had gone, and we were back home. We were like, oh, this is cool. And we now live together, which we didn't do before. So that's been really lovely. A bit of an adjustment, clearly, but yeah. So it's just been really, really strange, and but really, really lovely. The idea of doing these 12 weeks apart, I think, and having got so close and then not getting there at all, it's been rubbish. So apologies, Frank. I did miss a youth board meeting on the day of my wedding. I'm told it is a semi, permissible excuse, but we'll have to see.
I think that without doubt, that is the best excuse we've ever had for somebody not coming to a youth board meeting, and it is entirely an acceptable excuse, 100% acceptable excuse. So you were very much missed, but let's be clear, it was the best excuse we've ever
Thank
had,
you.
and I don't think anyone will ever be able to beat it for a reason of not coming to a youth board meeting. So yeah, congratulations to everyone at the trust. We did see a photo which was amazing, and yeah, well done, and huge congrats from us all.
Thank you. Yeah, it was because of the relatively short timescale, we were on the sort of youth board WhatsApp group a couple of days before the meeting was due to take place, and it was like, let's discuss these agenda items and who can make it. And everyone sorted on Zoom, does that, and then I just piped up to, oh, by the way, can't make it. Turns out I'm getting married, and everyone was like, what? But yeah, so that was really cool. And I think similar to Wen, like actually, I realised quite soon into the lockdown that I was possibly coping better than I thought I might. And then I was like, oh yeah, actually, I've done 3 weeks locked up before in the in the Marsden having a transplant and all that sort of thing. And I think that clearly it's very different circumstances, but the sort of feeling of I'm in this thing, don't quite know when it's going to end, completely out of my control. I've just got to enjoy what I can for the next few days and or the next few weeks or the next few months or whatever. I was like, oh yeah, that's where I've done that before. That's probably what's helping me more than I realised. And of course, the happiness of being newly married as well is contributing in a fairly big way.
Was there a moment when you were doing that planning and you saw that day and thought there's the wedding and there's the youth board meeting and you were like, darling, I love you, but
there's always a short moment. The trust has a very dear place in my heart, as you all know. I'm not sure it lasted for long, but not because, just for my fear of what might happen afterwards. It was quite funny actually, because I was in a similar position where what should have been our honeymoon and what should have been the volunteer training this year, and I did say, actually, when we get back from Venice, why don't we just take a detour past the Isle of Wight and I can go and do this sailing thing I've been invited on, but that didn't quite get past either, so I have to try another year. But I think I probably made the right decision as much as I love youth board meeting, just for sort of the long term.
I think you 100% made the right decision there.
So now we're going to hear a few words from Avalon, who I spoke to last summer when she sailed from Largs on her 3rd trip with the Trust. She has also just started her training to become a volunteer and will pick that back up once we're all back on the water. She tells us a little about her diagnosis, as well as what it's like getting to actually talk about having had cancer.
So I was diagnosed exactly a month before my 18th birthday, so quite a difficult time because my friends were passing their driving tests, going out, drinking, all that sort of stuff, and I was in hospital. I had stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, so it was quite late. I spent 2 weeks in hospital initially and then had 7 months of treatment. Pretty much knocked me flat for a year, and then took a year out of school to kind of get over it and redo my A-levels. Yeah, I try and avoid it at all costs, really, because a lot of people don't necessarily react very well to the word cancer, whereas people here, you don't have to explain, because I had cancer I may not be able to do this, or I had this life experience, or I left school a year late, whatever. It's not a stigma word, it's just normal, which is cool. I think you don't really realise how much stress you go through trying to avoid it, and it's not something that should be avoided because it's a big part of all of our lives and it's probably shaped our personalities quite a lot. But you do find yourself not wanting to make other people feel uncomfortable in everyday life by mentioning it. And it's quite a big thing to keep bottled up inside, really. So being in this sort of environment where you don't have to feel ashamed, not that you should anyway, but you don't have to explain yourself, is really nice and relaxing.
I think it's fair to say that we've all learned a lot this last month and a half, both personally and professionally. Can you tell me a positive thing you've learned since the start of March?
I think for me, one of the most positive things is that I've got a huge community around me that are all going through the same storm, not necessarily in the same boat, but that they look out for each other. And I think seeing communities across the whole of the UK like pull together in such crazy ways has been like really inspiring for me. Like seeing people have food dropped off on their door, and have like their NHS rainbows up in their windows, It's just been really great for me to see, even from a distance, just that camaraderie that's happening.
I think it's one of those times where you sort of, on a number of scales, you learn or remember about different ways to do things, and actually loads of different things to be thankful for. So similarly, my wife and I are now on lockdown. We're able to go out for a walk once a day. We're not getting food shop or anything, so we're getting like food deliveries, and sometimes the planning doesn't always go quite right, and you're like, oh no, we've run out of this. That's an absolute nightmare. It's like, oh, actually, the world isn't ending, and there are other things, and you get by learning new things, and actually that's be it new recipes to cook, or new games to play, or whatever. And I think that's it's a time where some people are going on and say, right, I want to learn a new language or learn a new musical instrument or whatever, but just people are learning lots and discovering new things about themselves, about society, and I think I'm really excited to see what society is going to look like once we get out of this whole thing, and just looking after each other, like Wen said, and just appreciating, I think, what's around us rather than always wanting the next big thing.
I'd sort of echo that, Scott, and expand on that a little bit. So I think, the kindness that people have shown, I think is, fantastic. And I think the appreciation for the NHS and everybody who makes the NHS work, and appreciation for people on the, on the front line. And I say the front line, in inverted commas, the people who have kept supermarkets going, the people who have collected our rubbish, the people who have delivered things that we need to our doors. And, and I think that I agree with Dan. I hope that we come out of this slightly, well, not even slightly, I hope we come out of this different, but different in a positive way. So I think an appreciation of those people who have kept the country going, and the people who've kept the NHS going, and the people who ultimately have looked after people who have been very unwell. And then I suppose the other thing is that I hope that people come out with a better appreciation of what Wen and Dan and so many other young people who come sailing with the trust or come on a trip with the trust have gone through when they've been in isolation. So actually an appreciation of, how difficult it must be to do this when not everyone else is doing this. Because it's been really interesting to me. I've chatted to Wen, I've chatted to Dan, I've chatted to some other young people, and people who are now volunteers with the trust who were young people, and actually what all of them have said, almost to and every individual, they've said it's so much easier doing this now. Everyone else is doing it, and because everyone else is going through the same thing, and therefore they appreciate it. And I really hope that in 6 months' time we haven't, or 6 months after we've come out of this, I hope that we haven't forgot the people that kept us all going and the country going, and we haven't forgotten how difficult it is for someone to be in isolation because they've just had a bone marrow transplant when not everyone else is in isolation. And that's, I suppose, that if that happens, that's a positive I'll take from this.
So anyone who's been on a trust trip knows we play best bit, worst bit, and funniest bit at the end of a trip. So I thought it'd be nice to go round the room and get some tales of the trust. Dan, out of everything you've been involved with here, what's been your best bit?
Best bit ever being involved with the trust?
Ever.
That is a very good question. I think this is going to sound like a stereotypical answer because quite a few people give it, but I think it's so true. Just seeing the transformation in some of the young people from the Monday morning when you first get on the red jet, being really shy, through to just being completely different people. And I was probably one of them on my first trip. I was spoken about and wasn't quite sure what to expect, and just the transformation by the time you get to Friday night, I think, and I'm sure that happens on every trip. It's definitely happened on the 3 I've been on. But just through everything that happens sort of magically, not there's you don't go into a cabin and go, right, now you're going to feel better and come back out again. It's just the magic of the trust, as we like to say.
A lot of people say it, but they say it because it's true. It's always a delight to see that happen, and as you say, that's part of the magic that's happening on trust trips, I think. You've been here from the start, Frank. Hopefully you don't have a long list bursting to get out here, but what's been the worst bit?
So I'm going to give you a serious worst bit and a slightly funnier worst bit, and then you can edit them out if you want to, Scott. I think the serious worst bit has actually been the decisions we've had to make over the last 5 weeks. I think, I've been involved with the trust since the beginning, and then I've worked full time for the trust since 2005. Never had to delay and cancel trips before. And that, I'll be honest, that's definitely been my worst bit. And if I'm honest, I think we're going to end up having to make some more hard decisions over the next few weeks. And I think that's also going to be the worst bit. So that's my serious worst bit. And my funny worst bit, which I think is what you want, because I think you've heard this story once before. I thought that I had got rid of this story from the trust's history, but for those that now are going to know it, and it's going to carry on for another 10 years. About 10 years ago, we did around the island race, and at the time we were very lovingly supported by Volvo, and they used to lend us this XC90, and we had one boat around the island race. We'd done the race, it was a Sunday, everyone was about to go home. We were going to drive the bags down in this XC90, everyone else was going to walk down to the ferry. Had a great weekend, everyone had a blast. Put all the bags in the Volvo, put the key in my pocket. There's people already seeing where this is going. Locked the car, walked down to the pontoon, jumped on the boat to get everyone to start walking down to the Red Jet, and I felt the key slowly slip out of my pocket, and then I heard that awful sound of something falling into the water, and yeah, we had everybody's bags locked in this car, this lovely Volvo XC90. They were all about to go home. What I discovered from the nice AA man who came to try and unlock the boot is that a Volvo is basically more secure than Fort Knox. So we had to send everyone home without their bags. And then 2 days later, the lovely people from Volvo sent us a new key. And then we basically had to wrap their bags up and send them back to them by post. And that was my worst bit. That really was my worst bit. But obviously, as I said at the beginning, what we've been through over the last 4 weeks, that has been pretty tough, because there's no funny side to it. And there was, after a few days, a funny side to the XC90. I can laugh about it now. Can't believe I've told everyone about it. There was no one left who remembered it. So I basically reinvented it for the next 10 years. So I should have kept quiet.
I like the idea that there's no one left who can talk about it, as if Frank has spent the last 10 years paying everyone off to never mention it again. Whenever I'm around you, there are smiles, there's lots of laughing. I bumped into you at the Birmingham Volunteer Training and Update Day, and you just came up to me shouting at me in Welsh. It was hilarious. What do you have a funniest highlight from your time at the Trust?
Oh my goodness, there are so many funny moments to pick and choose, and honestly, every trip there's always hilarity. Normally to do with me and playing articulate. Apparently, I'm quite comedic when I get excited, and a bit competitive. But for me, I think there are so many things, but the things that have stood to mind right now is the things from my trips last year. And there was a moment where I was at Bradwell, and they do a garbage bag fashion show, and seeing some of the volunteer staff members dressed up in bin bags was quite hilarious. And also on the trip that I did to Holliford, there was a hilarious moment with Lorna playing Irish Snap. And it was everyone on the whole trip just fell about laughing as soon as they had heard the story or were around in that story. And I think that there's so many hilarious moments, but it's hard to convey just how funny they are. But we've all got those moments that we can look back on in this time and remember, oh my goodness, remember when, oh, remember this. And I just thought about last year as well. I got stuck on the Jacob's ladder at Bradwell, and that was quite funny. And there's a hilarious video clip of me getting stuck on that too. So yeah, maybe we'll share that at some point to make you all laugh.
Maybe we will. Maybe we will. So thank you so much for everyone joining us today. That's it for the first episode of Sound Waves. We're going to be here going forward to keep you company during lockdown and way into the future as well. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, take care.